How God answers even when you think you are alone. Have you ever prayed with tears in your eyes and nothing changed? You asked for healing, the diagnosis stayed the same. You asked for clarity, the confusion remained. You asked for relief, the pressure increased, and in that moment the silence felt louder than any storm. You lay awake at night replaying the prayer in your mind. Did I say it wrong? Did I not have enough faith? Did God hear me? The room felt still. The ceiling did not open. No sign, no sudden breakthrough, just the quiet weight of waiting. And slowly, almost dangerously, a thought begins to form. Maybe I am alone in this. That thought is heavier than the problem itself. Because pain you can endure, but abandonment feels unbearable. You can fight a battle if you know someone stands with you, but when you think heaven is silent, your strength starts to shake. Let me ask you something that may change how you see everything. What if God answered you, but not in the language you were expecting? What if the answer did not come as removal, but as reinforcement? Not as escape, but as endurance? Not as an open door, but as protection from the wrong one? Sometimes we expect lightning. God sends alignment. We expect a voice. He sends strength. We expect change around us. He begins changing us. The greatest danger is not that God is silent. The greatest danger is that we misunderstand the way He speaks. Tonight we are not talking about cliché comfort. We are going deeper. We are exposing the hidden ways God responds when you think you are alone. Because if you are still standing after what tried to break you, something was happening that you did not see. And before we talk about how He answers, we need to confront something even more important. Loneliness changes the way you interpret everything. Loneliness distorts perception. When you feel alone, your mind does not stay neutral. It begins to interpret. Silence becomes rejection. Delay becomes denial. Waiting becomes abandonment. Your emotional state starts translating events through fear instead of faith. If you are honest, some of the darkest conclusions you have reached were not born in peace. They were born in isolation. When you feel unsupported, your thoughts grow louder. Doubt becomes persuasive. The absence of visible movement feels like proof that nothing is happening. But perception is not always reality. Loneliness magnifies uncertainty. It shrinks hope. It turns a closed door into a personal rejection. It turns unanswered timing into assumed neglect. And this is where many believers quietly struggle. Not because God stopped moving, but because emotional pain distorted spiritual interpretation. You prayed for direction and did not get immediate clarity, so you assumed He was not guiding. You asked for comfort and did not feel instant peace, so you assumed He was distant. You waited and saw no visible shift, so you assumed heaven was inactive. But what if your feelings are not reliable translators? There are moments when God is working beneath the surface while your emotions are demanding visible proof. Think about it. Seeds grow underground long before anything appears above the soil. Roots expand in darkness before fruit ever becomes visible. If you judged growth only by what you could see, you would call the soil empty. Loneliness makes you judge the soil too early. And this is why understanding perception is crucial. Because before we can recognize how God answers, we must admit that our emotional condition can misread divine activity. If you have ever mistaken delay for abandonment, what we are about to uncover will shift your perspective completely. Because sometimes the first answer God sends does not change your situation at all. It changes your strength. God answers with strength before He changes circumstances. You asked God to remove the pressure. He strengthened your shoulders. You asked Him to end the storm. He taught you how to stand in the wind. This is one of the most misunderstood ways God answers. We expect deliverance to look like escape. We expect intervention to look like immediate change. But many times, the first answer does not alter the environment. It fortifies the person inside it. Think about what you survived. There were moments you were certain would crush you, nights when your chest felt tight with fear, days when you said, "I cannot carry this anymore." And yet you are still here, not untouched, not unchanged, but standing. That endurance was not accidental. In Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31, it says that those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. It does not say their circumstances will instantly disappear. It says their strength will be renewed. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Strength was the answer. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not that the fire goes out, but that you do not burn up in it. You prayed for the situation to shift. Instead, you found yourself calmer than expected, clearer than expected, more resilient than expected. That resilience did not come from you alone. God answers at the level of sustainability. If He removed every hardship instantly, your character would remain fragile. If He solved every crisis immediately, your faith would stay shallow. So sometimes the answer comes as reinforcement first, resolution later. You may not have seen doors open, but you developed patience. You may not have seen immediate relief, but you gained stability. You may not have received the outcome you scripted, but you received the capacity to endure it. And here is the deeper truth. If the situation had changed without you changing, you might not have been ready to carry what came next. Strength is preparation disguised as delay. And once you begin to see that something shifts, you realize that surviving what should have destroyed you is evidence of divine involvement. But strength is not the only hidden language God uses. Sometimes the answer sounds like silence. Sometimes it looks like a closed door. Closed doors are sometimes loud answers. You prayed for that opportunity to work. You believed that relationship was the one. You asked God to make it happen. And then the door closed. No explanation, no warning, just a sudden ending. At first it felt like rejection. It felt like loss. It felt like heaven ignored you. But what if that closed door was not silence? What if it was protection? We often assume that an open door means favor and a closed one means denial. But God sees dimensions you do not. He sees consequences you cannot predict. He sees motives hidden beneath appearances. He sees outcomes long before you experience beginnings. In Acts chapter 16, verse 6-7, Paul intended to go into certain regions to preach. Good intention, clear mission. But the Spirit prevented him, blocked him, redirected him. That prevention was not abandonment. It was guidance. Imagine if every door you prayed for had opened. Some would have led you into exhaustion, some into compromise, some into relationships that would have slowly drained your calling, some into paths that looked promising but carried invisible cost. You called it disappointment. God called it preservation. A closed door can feel humiliating. It can shake your confidence. It can make you question your discernment. But protection rarely feels comfortable in the moment. It feels confusing. You do not always see the accident that did not happen. You do not see the betrayal you were spared. You do not see the long-term damage that was quietly avoided. You only see the immediate no. But sometimes no is the loudest answer you will ever receive. What if the job you did not get was the burnout you did not need? What if the relationship that ended was the heartbreak that would have multiplied? What if the plan that failed was the detour that kept you alive? Silence does not always mean absence. Closure does not always mean rejection. Sometimes the most loving answer God can give you is interruption. And here is the part that requires humility. You do not always have the full picture while the door is closing. Recognition often comes later. Clarity is frequently retroactive. Which brings us to something even more unsettling. Sometimes God answers not by calming your life, but by disrupting it. God answers through disruption. Not every answer comes wrapped in peace. Sometimes it arrives as disruption. You were comfortable, then everything shifted, plans unraveled, timelines collapsed, people changed, stability disappeared, and you thought, this cannot be God, this feels chaotic. But what if the disruption was the direction? We are conditioned to associate God with calm waters. Yet throughout Scripture, divine movement often came through interruption. In Acts chapter 16, verse 6 to 7, Paul was prevented by the Spirit from entering regions he intended to go. It was not sin, it was not rebellion, it was redirection. Prevention was guidance. There are seasons when God will disturb what you are trying to preserve because he sees where it will lead. He will unsettle your routine. He will shake your confidence in certain plans. He will allow tension that forces you to reconsider what you assumed was permanent. Disruption exposes attachment. Sometimes you were not attached to God's will. You were attached to your version of it. And when that version collapses, it feels like loss. But loss can be the gateway to alignment. You prayed for purpose. He dismantled your comfort. You prayed for growth. He allowed pressure. You prayed for clarity. He removed the illusion. Chaos is uncomfortable because it removes control. But control was never your source of security. God was. If your life had continued exactly as you planned, you might never have asked deeper questions. You might never have surrendered fully. You might never have discovered strength you did not know you carried. Sometimes the shaking is the answer. The disruption you resent may be the doorway to the version of you that is ready for the next level. And here is what makes this hard. When disruption happens, it does not feel divine. It feels destabilizing. It feels unfair. It feels confusing. But when you look back, you will often see that what broke your routine built your future. And this leads to another hidden layer. Sometimes you feel nothing at all. No disruption, no breakthrough, no visible movement, just stillness. And even in that stillness, God may be working deeper than you imagine. When you feel nothing, he is working invisibly. There are seasons when there is no breakthrough and no breakdown, no dramatic door closing, no visible disruption, no powerful emotional encounter, just nothing. You pray and feel neutral. You worship and feel steady. You ask for direction and receive no immediate sign. And that emptiness can be more unsettling than chaos, because at least chaos feels like movement. Stillness feels like abandonment. But what if the absence of visible change is not inactivity? What if it is underground work? Roots grow in darkness. Before a tree stretches upward, it expands downward. Before fruit appears, foundation deepens. If you judged growth by what you could see above the surface, you would call the soil lifeless. Yet beneath it, expansion is happening. In John chapter 11, Jesus delayed going to Lazarus. From a human perspective, that delay looked like neglect. But the delay set the stage for something greater than immediate healing. It revealed a deeper dimension of power. Delay was not indifference, it was intention. When you feel nothing, God may be restructuring you internally, adjusting your motives, healing unseen wounds, strengthening emotional muscles you did not know were weak, recalibrating desires that drifted off course. You may not feel dramatic transformation, but you may notice subtle shifts. You react differently than you used to. You endure more than before. You think more clearly under pressure. That invisible strengthening is not random. We often look for visible miracles while ignoring internal renovation. God does not only answer by changing what surrounds you, he answers by reshaping who you are becoming. And here is the paradox. If he moved everything externally before preparing you internally, the blessing could crush you. So sometimes he works in silence, because the work required cannot be rushed. You may feel unseen, you may feel untouched, but invisible does not mean inactive. The deepest construction happens where no one is watching, and sometimes the answer you are waiting for is already unfolding through people you did not expect. God answers through people you did not expect. You were waiting for a sign from heaven. God sent a person. You were looking for a supernatural moment. He arranged a conversation. Not every answer comes through lightning. Sometimes it comes through someone's voice at the right time, a message that feels strangely personal, a phone call that arrives when you were at your lowest, a sermon that speaks directly into what you never told anyone, a stranger who says exactly what you needed to hear. We often overlook these moments because they do not look dramatic, but God has always worked through people. In Exodus chapter 3, God spoke to Moses through a burning bush, yes, but later he guided him through relationships, through counsel, through voices placed in his path. Divine orchestration does not always announce itself. You may have prayed for strength and then met someone who reminded you who you are. You may have asked for clarity and then heard a sentence that realigned your thinking. You may have begged for comfort and then felt seen through an unexpected embrace. We dismiss these as coincidences because they lack spectacle. But heaven often moves quietly through human connection. The problem is that when you feel alone, you expect God to answer in isolation. You expect him to break the ceiling open. Meanwhile, he may be answering through community. You were not ignored. You were surrounded. If you retrace your steps, you may realize that help appeared in subtle forms. Guidance showed up disguised as advice. Encouragement arrived in casual words. Divine answers do not always interrupt reality. Sometimes they blend into it, and here is the deeper shift. Sometimes the answer you received was not what you asked for. The answer may be different from your request. You prayed for the situation to change. God began changing you. You asked him to remove the struggle. He reshaped your perspective inside it. This is where many people miss the answer. We approach God with specific expectations. We present the outcome we want. We imagine the scenario that would make us feel secure. And when that exact script does not unfold, we assume the prayer was ignored. But God answers at the level of eternity, not convenience. You asked for clarity. He gave you trust. You asked for relief. He built endurance. You asked for immediate provision. He developed discipline. You asked for the relationship to stay. He protected your future. The answer was real. It just did not match your blueprint. In Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20, it speaks of God doing exceedingly abundantly above all we ask or think. Above does not always mean bigger in visible scale. Sometimes it means deeper in internal transformation. You wanted the storm gone. He made you stronger in the storm. You wanted instant results. He created long-term stability. The painful truth is this: if God gave you everything exactly as you requested, you might miss what you actually needed. We pray from limited vision. He responds from complete perspective. And this is not about dismissing your pain. It is about elevating your understanding. The disappointment you felt may have been the doorway to maturity. The answer you resisted may have been the one that saved you from a version of success that would have damaged you. Sometimes the greatest evidence that God answered is who you are becoming. And here is something even deeper. When answers are delayed or reshaped, something happens in the relationship itself. Silence begins to build intimacy. The silence that builds intimacy. There is a kind of silence that feels empty, and there is a kind of silence that deepens love. When every prayer is answered immediately, faith can become transactional. You ask, he gives, you move on. But when answers are delayed, something shifts in the relationship. You stop seeking outcomes and start seeking presence. In silence, motives are revealed. Are you pursuing God for what he can do or for who he is? When the visible results pause, the foundation of your faith is tested, not to break it, but to strengthen it. Job did not receive immediate explanations. David wrote psalms from caves before he saw crowns. In Psalm chapter 27, verse 14, it speaks of waiting on the Lord and being strengthened in the heart. Waiting is not passive, it is relational. Silence forces you to sit with him without guarantees. You talk longer, You listen deeper. You confront your fears honestly. You discover that even without visible movement, His presence sustains you, and something remarkable happens. You begin to realize that the greatest gift was never the outcome. It was the closeness developed in the waiting. Silence removes superficial faith. It exposes dependency on results. It draws you into something steadier. When you are no longer chasing signs, you start cultivating communion. And often when you look back, you realize that the quiet seasons were the ones that anchored you most securely. But here is the challenge. Many answers are recognized only in hindsight. You may have already received an answer and simply failed to recognize it. How to recognize an answer you missed. Let me ask you something honestly. Did you grow through what you prayed about? Did you survive what once terrified you? Did something shift inside you, even if the situation outside remained the same? Sometimes the answer was not dramatic enough for your expectations, so you dismissed it. You were looking for instant change, but instead you developed resilience. You were waiting for the door to open, but instead you were redirected towards something better. You were praying for peace, and instead you received clarity that helped you make a hard decision. We miss answers because we expect them to look a certain way. Look back carefully. Were you protected from something you insisted on? Did a delay prevent you from stepping into something premature? Did the pain refine you instead of destroying you? Recognition is often retroactive. In Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, Joseph looked back at betrayal and saw purpose. In the moment, it felt like abandonment. Later, he saw design. Perspective changed everything. You may need to revisit your own story. Where did you see unexpected strength appear? Where did support show up at the right time? Where did wisdom increase after confusion? Answers are not always explosive. Sometimes they are progressive. You may have been expecting a miracle in your circumstances while God was building one in your character. And here is the most powerful realization. If you are still standing after what you went through, something carried you. Which brings us to a truth you must hear clearly. You were never unheard. Prophetic turn, you were never unheard. Listen carefully. If you are still standing, that is evidence. You may not have received the answer the way you imagined it. You may not have seen the miracle unfold according to your timeline, but you were not ignored. In Romans chapter 8, verse 26, it says that the Spirit helps us in our weakness, and when we do not know how to pray as we ought, the Spirit Himself intercedes for us. That means even when your words were confused, heaven understood. Even when your prayer was nothing more than tears, it was translated. You thought you were speaking into emptiness. You were speaking into eternity. God may not have answered in the language you scripted, but He never dismissed your voice. He may not have changed the scene immediately, but He was present in it. You were carried through moments you cannot explain. You were preserved in ways you did not notice. You were guided even when you thought you were guessing. The fact that you are still seeking, still believing, still listening, means something sacred has been sustaining you. Loneliness told you that you were abandoned. Delay convinced you that you were overlooked. But the evidence says otherwise. You endured, you adapted, you matured. Those are not signs of divine absence. They are signs of divine involvement. And now, here is the invitation. Stop measuring God's faithfulness by visible speed. Start recognizing it by sustained presence. You were never unheard. And this leads us to the final truth. The answer is still unfolding. The answer is unfolding. What feels like silence today may become clarity tomorrow. You are living in the middle of the story, not at the end of it. And in the middle, things rarely make complete sense. The threads look disconnected. The delays feel unnecessary. The waiting feels heavy. But unfolding is not the same as absence. Some answers arrive instantly. Others develop over time. They take shape through growth, through redirection, through strengthening, through protection you only understand later. You may still be waiting for the visible shift, but do not ignore the invisible movement. You are wiser than you were. You are steadier than you were. You are less fragile than you were. That did not happen by accident. God is not confined to dramatic moments. He works through layers, through seasons, through processes that feel slow but are deeply intentional. In Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11, it says that He makes everything beautiful in its time. Not always in your time, in its time. That means there is structure to what feels chaotic. There is design inside what feels delayed. You are not alone in the waiting. You are not unseen in the valley. You are not unanswered in the dark. If you thought heaven was silent, look again. Strength was speaking. Protection was speaking. Redirection was